The moment. Looking at the sky for June 10th, 2026. The dominant signature is unmistakable, a spotlight. The sun in the communicative sign of Gemini sits exactly at the top of the chart, the midheaven. This isn't a behind closed doors administrative shuffle. The survival of Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu is a high noon public performance, a moment where the nation's eyes are fixed squarely on the leadership. To survive a no-confidence vote in such a climate suggests not just political maneuvering, but a sheer force of personality and public presence. Yet, the atmosphere is thick with restriction. Mercury, the planet of speech and negotiation, is clamped down by a tight square to Saturn. In the weeks leading up to this day, the rhetoric in the National Assembly would have been heavy, dour, and pessimistic. Saturn brings the weight of reality and the fear of collapse, so the debate surrounding Lecornu's tenure was likely dominated by talk of austerity, hard limits, and the impossibility of governing. However, the very tight Mars trine to the ascendant, Mars representing the drive to act, provided the necessary grit. There is a defensive, stabilizing energy here. Despite the noise of potential collapse, the actual mechanism of the vote held firm. The cyclic index is rising toward a peak of dispersal, meaning the weeks prior were fracturing. Tensions were snapping along old lines, and this vote served as a pressure valve that, for now, held back the flood. What it touches. To understand why this survival is so precarious, we have to look at what the sky is doing to France's own birth chart. The picture is one of a state apparatus undergoing profound shock. Transiting Uranus, the planet of sudden upheaval and revolution, is sitting right on top of France's natal Mars. Mundane astrology reads Mars as the executive muscle, the police, the military, and the capacity of the state to enforce its will. With Uranus electrifying this point, the lead-up to this vote was almost certainly accompanied by civil unrest, strikes, or a breakdown in the usual chain of command. The government is fighting off a challenge that isn't just parliamentary. It is coming from the streets and the machinery of the state itself. Simultaneously, transiting Pluto is squaring France's Jupiter. Jupiter represents the law, the judiciary, and the broader philosophy of the nation. A square from Pluto, the planet of deep finance, shadow deals, and transformation, indicates a power struggle over the very soul of the republic's direction. There is a feeling of resources being squeezed, or a plutocratic tension where the financial reality is clashing with the national image. The no-confidence vote was merely the lightning rod for these deeper structural fractures, a challenge to how the state uses its power, Mars, and manages its wealth and laws, Jupiter. When we look at Sébastien Lecornu personally, the synastry with France tells a story of a man who is both a product of the system and an agent of its discomfort. France's Saturn, the old establishment, sits tightly on his Uranus. He is the modernizer, perhaps the technician, who rubs against the traditional grain of the state. Yet he survives because he is undergoing his own Pluto transformation. Transiting Pluto is sextiling his Saturn, granting him a grim, almost ironclad endurance. He is able to absorb pressure that would break others. On the day of the vote, the transiting Sun exactly conjoins his natal Sun, the return of the king, confirming that although the ship is leaking, the captain remains at the helm. How it rolls forward. The weeks following this survival will not bring a return to calm. The sky shows that the friction is only shifting gears. While the immediate threat of the vote has passed, the underlying instability, represented by Uranus on France's Mars, remains active. We should expect continued agitation from the unions or public sector workers. Mars rules strikes and industrial action, even if the government has secured its numerical majority. The real pivot comes in mid-July. The planetary landscape shifts as Jupiter moves to oppose Pluto. This is a signature of excess, extremes bubbling over, and power dynamics being pushed to their breaking point. If the no-confidence vote was about political survival, July brings a conflict about resources and perhaps foreign entanglements. The narrative arc moves from the survival of the minister to the solvency of the state. Furthermore, mid-July brings a rare Uranus trine Pluto aspect. This slow-moving cycle usually signals technology, economic systems, or geopolitical blocks undergoing rapid, invisible restructuring. For France, this suggests that while the political theater in Paris continues, the real changes are happening in the deep financial corridors and digital infrastructures. The dispersal indicated by the cyclic index suggests that events will begin to move faster than the bureaucracy can track. There is a tarot impression here of the chariot, a vehicle moving forward, but only through sheer, exhausting willpower, with the horses pulling in different directions. Lecornu stays, but the road ahead requires white-knuckled control. Summary: this event marks a moment of high-wire political survival for the French Prime Minister, set against a backdrop of profound structural instability and civil agitation. Watch for escalating civil unrest and strikes as the transit of Uranus over France's Mars continues to agitate the state's executive function. Monitor budgetary battles and judicial clashes driven by transiting Pluto square to France's Jupiter, signaling a fight over the nation's financial philosophy. Expect a shift toward extreme policy measures or foreign disputes in mid-July, when Jupiter opposes Pluto, reflecting a crisis of excess and power. Observe the stability of the currency and deep finance, as the Uranus trine Pluto aspect in July suggests an invisible, rapid restructuring of economic foundations. Track the Prime Minister's health and stamina. The chart suggests he is holding the line through sheer will, but the personal pressure indicated by his solar return is immense. The government lives to fight another day, but the astrology suggests this is a reprieve rather than a resolution, with the harder battles for France's soul and solvency still gathering on the horizon.